The night everything cracked open began like any other quiet American evening. Rain tapped against the kitchen window of a tidy suburban home in Ohio, and the clock above the stove blinked 9:42 p.m. Claire Mitchell stood alone, staring at her reflection in the dark glass, holding a phone that would change the rest of her life. One unread message glowed on the screen. She didn't need to open it to know what it said. She already felt the weight of it in her chest. This was the moment she would remember forever, the moment before the fall. Claire had spent most of her adult life being dependable. She was the woman who remembered birthdays, packed lunches, and showed up early. She married her college sweetheart, David Mitchell, when they were both young and hopeful. David was steady, kind, and respected. He worked as a civil engineer, coached Little League on weekends, and believed deeply in loyalty. For years, their marriage was built on routine and trust. Maybe too much routine, maybe too much trust. Their home was warm but quiet. Conversations became shorter. Laughter came less often. Nothing was wrong in a way that could be pointed to, but something was missing. Claire told herself that this was normal, that long marriages settled into calm. Still, late at night, she felt a hollow space inside her, like a room that once held music and now held dust. The person who noticed this change was someone David trusted without question. Ethan Parker. Ethan was not family, but he was close. He had been David's best friend since high school. They played football together, shared bad haircuts and bigger dreams, and promised to always have each other's backs. Ethan was around often. He came over for Sunday dinners, helped fix the deck, and sat at their table like he belonged there. He was charming in a quiet way, thoughtful and observant. Where David was practical, Ethan was reflective. Where David avoided emotional talks, Ethan leaned into them. Claire never planned to see Ethan differently. At first, she barely noticed him at all. He was just part of the background of her life, like an old song on the radio. But slowly, without asking her permission, something shifted. It began with conversations, small ones, innocent ones. Ethan would ask how her day was and actually wait for the answer. He remembered details. If you notice when she seemed tired or distant. When David was busy or distracted, Ethan listened. Claire told herself it meant nothing. People were allowed to talk. Friends were allowed to care. One evening, after a neighborhood barbecue, David left early to take a work call. Claire stayed behind to help clean up. Ethan stayed too. They stood side by side, washing dishes under yellow porch lights. The air was warm, the kind of summer night that made people honest. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly. Claire shrugged, "Just tired." Ethan nodded, as if he understood more than she had said. "You don't have to pretend with me." That sentence landed harder than she expected. It opened a door she didn't know was locked. After that night, things moved faster than Claire could control. Text messages became longer. Jokes became personal. Silence between them became heavy with meaning. Still, nothing crossed a line. Not yet. Claire held tightly to that fact, using it like a shield against guilt. She told herself she was lonely, not disloyal. She told herself she deserved to feel seen. She told herself it would end before it became something she couldn't undo. But life doesn't always give warnings. Sometimes it just keeps going. One afternoon, Claire and Ethan were alone in the Mitchell house. David was out of town for a conference. The house felt different without him, too quiet to open. They sat at opposite ends of the couch, talking about nothing and everything. Old dreams, regrets, the way time changed people. Ethan spoke about his divorce, about how he had failed to fight for what mattered. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. Claire felt a pull in her chest, a dangerous mix of empathy and attraction. When Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, she felt exposed in a way she hadn't felt in years. When their hands brushed by accident, neither pulled away right away. That was the moment. The clear moment. The line in the sand. Claire stood up abruptly, her heart racing. "This isn't right," she said. Ethan nodded, pain crossing his face. I know, he left soon after. The door closing behind him sounded final, like a warning. Claire paced the living room, angry at herself, terrified of what she was feeling. She promised herself it would stop. She promised herself she would fix her marriage. She promised herself she would forget. But feelings don't disappear just because we ask them to. Days passed, then weeks. David returned, unaware of the storm growing beneath his roof. Claire smiled. She cooked. She listened. But inside, she was unraveling. Ethan stayed away at first, then slowly drifted back into their lives. He and David went fishing. They laughed like always. The normalcy made Claire feel sick. One night, unable to sleep, Claire opened her phone. There was a message. From Ethan, just one sentence. I think about you every day. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed back, I do too. That was the moment she betrayed her husband. Not with words, spoken out loud, but with a choice. A clear, conscious choice. From there, everything accelerated. I met for coffee under the excuse of errands. They talked in parked cars, they shared fears and hopes that should have stayed locked away. Still, nothing explicit happened. No scenes that could be described. But the emotional bond deepened, and that bond carried its own kind of intimacy. Claire lived in constant tension. She loved her husband. She also loved the way Ethan made her feel alive. She hated herself for needing both. Each night she lay beside David, staring at the ceiling, wondering when the truth would surface. The cracks began to show. David noticed her distance. He noticed the way she jumped when her phone buzzed. He noticed the silence where warmth used. To be one evening over dinner, he asked, is something wrong? Claire wanted to tell him everything. The truth pressed against her throat, begging to be released. But fear won. I'm just tired, she said. David studied her for a moment, then nodded. But something changed in his eyes. Trust, once broken, often starts with a feeling, not proof. The final night of part 1 came unexpectedly. Ethan called Claire after midnight. His voice was tight. I can't do this anymore, he said. Either we stop completely or we admit what this is. Claire felt the room spin. She knew what he meant. There was no safe middle ground left. We can't, she whispered. This is destroying everything. There was a long silence. Then Ethan said, I think David knows. He asked me questions today. Claire's breath caught. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. What kind of questions? She asked. The kind that mean this is about to end, Ethan said. One way or another. After the call ended, Claire sat alone in the dark, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Outside, the rain started again, tapping against the windows like a countdown. She didn't know yet how much she would lose. She didn't know the full cost of betrayal, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity: nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Claire woke to the sound of the coffee maker dripping, but it felt heavier than usual. The house was quiet, too quiet, and the silence pressed on her chest like a weight she could no longer ignore. She had spent the night tossing, turning, thinking about Ethan's words, David's questions, the small, unavoidable signs he had started noticing. Every choice she had made, the texts, the hidden meetings, the stolen glances, suddenly felt like stepping on broken glass. She realized there was no going back, not without pain, not without loss. David came down the stairs in his usual calm way, wearing the same tired blue shirt from work. He poured his coffee, paused, and looked at her. Claire, are you okay? He asked gently. His eyes searched hers, steady and familiar, but there was something sharper beneath them, the thread of doubt that hadn't been there before. She forced a smile and nodded. Just tired, I guess, she said. But even as the words left her lips, she knew they rang hollow. The tension stretched across the breakfast table like an invisible thread. Every spoonful of cereal, every sip of coffee felt like walking on a tightrope. Claire wanted to speak, to spill everything and unburden herself, but fear held her tongue. Fear of David's pain. Fear of Ethan's disappearance. Fear of herself. After work, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. She needed to see Ethan one last time to face him and decide whether to end this emotional storm or let it spiral. Further, she texted him, "We need to talk today. Can we meet?" Almost immediately, his reply came, "I'm outside. Drive down." The street was quiet when she arrived at the small cafe they had frequented in the past weeks. Ethan was sitting in their usual corner booth, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. He looked older somehow, worn at the edges, but his eyes held that familiar intensity. When Claire slid into the booth across from him, the air between them vibrated. With unspoken words, "We can't keep doing this," Ethan said without preamble. His voice was low but firm. "I can't keep pretending I'm just a friend. And you can't either." Claire's fingers clenched around her mug. "I know," she whispered. "I'm trying to fight it, but it's everywhere, Ethan. It's like I can't breathe without thinking about you, and I hate myself for it. I hate myself because I love David. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to destroy what we have, but I can't stop this feeling." Ethan leaned forward. "Then maybe you need to be honest. With him, with yourself. Secrets don't disappear. They grow." Her throat tightened. The truth was terrifying. She had promised herself she would never betray David fully, but this was more than just hidden feelings. It had grown roots. It had a life of its own. And now David was already sensing it. When she returned home, David was in the living room reading. He didn't look up when she walked in. The quiet was deafening. Claire's heart raced. She knew this moment would define everything. She sat down beside him, hands trembling. "We need to talk," she began, her voice breaking. He looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time in years, Claire saw that something had shifted. The warmth was still there, but underneath it was caution, suspicion, and heartbreak, waiting to surface. "Okay," he said quietly, "I'm listening." Claire swallowed hard. "I've been distant, been making choices that I shouldn't have. I have feelings for someone else." David's face went pale, and his hand froze over the magazine he was holding. "Someone else?" His voice was steady but sharp. "Claire, how far?" She could feel tears welling, but she held herself. "It's emotional. Nothing physical, but it's wrong. I can't lie to you anymore. I wanted to stop before. It went further, but I was weak. I let it grow in my mind, and I hurt you without touching anyone. It's still betrayal." David's eyes filled with a storm of emotions. Hurt, confusion, disbelief. He didn't speak for a long moment, just stared at her. Then he said quietly, "I trusted you. I thought we were safe. I thought we were enough." Claire felt her chest tighten. "I know. I destroyed that. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. I still love you. But I don't know how to fix this without being honest. I can't pretend anymore." For hours, they talked, carefully, painfully. Claire explained how it began with loneliness, then small conversations, then feelings she didn't intend to have. She didn't blame Ethan. She didn't want to. The responsibility was hers, and she accepted it. David listened, asking questions, expressing his pain, sometimes sitting in silence. The house felt like it was holding its breath with them. The first storm passed with tears and quiet despair. David left the room for a moment, and Claire sat alone, feeling raw. She knew there would be no easy fix. There would be consequences. Trust, once shaken, was not rebuilt overnight. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional fallout continued. David needed space, and Claire respected it. She cut contact with Ethan completely. No calls, no texts, no meetings. It was painful but necessary. She realized that part of loving David was putting his well-being above her own feelings. even if it meant losing the connection that had awakened a part of her she didn't know existed. David eventually began to speak more. He asked questions about their future, about forgiveness, about what she wanted. Claire answered honestly, always with care and humility. She knew trust would return only slowly, if at all. Every step required transparency. Every conversation required vulnerability. Every glance a reminder that she had almost lost everything. During this time, Claire focused on herself too. She sought therapy, journaling, and reflection. She learned to face her own emotions without letting them dictate actions. That the longing she had felt was real, but it was misguided. It was not about Ethan or David. Alana, it was about her own unmet needs, her own fear of stagnation. Understanding this didn't make the guilt lighter, but it gave her a way forward. Months passed. The house felt quieter, but healthier. Small signs of healing emerged. David smiled again at her jokes. He held her hand when no one was looking. They began to talk about trips, about friends, about normal life, pieces of trust being rebuilt like fragile glass. Claire knew nothing could erase the past, but she also knew that choosing honesty over continued secrecy had been the only way. To even begin healing, Claire never forgot the temptation, the excitement, the emotional connection with Ethan, but she learned that some feelings, no matter how intense, cannot justify betrayal. They could only teach lessons about desire, responsibility, and love. She carried the memory like a scar, a constant reminder of what she almost lost and what she had to fight for every day. The trust and love of her husband. By the end of the year, Claire and David sat in the living room, wrapped in a quiet peace that felt earned. They were not perfect, and they would never forget the storm they had weathered. But they had chosen each other again, deliberately, with eyes wide open. Claire knew the road ahead would require constant care, honesty, and courage. And as she held David's hand, feeling the pulse of life and loyalty in his grip, she promised herself one thing. She would never let longing blind her again. She would honor the life she had chosen, the man she had vowed to love, and the home they had built together. She had paid a heavy price for a moment of weakness. But the lessons would guide her for the rest of her life. The rain returned that evening, gentle against the windows, but it no longer felt like a warning. It felt like renewal. And Claire finally took a deep breath and let herself believe in the fragile, imperfect beauty of second chances.